This is a public hearing, and the presenter just now made some statements. I'd like to ask a question since you presented in a public hearing. First of all, your letters came today. There was a meeting and an educational component a few weeks ago, and your company was not present. Can you tell us why?
Yeah, we learned of that meeting actually after it had occurred. Apparently an email was sent out. For some reason, we did not receive it. It actually went into my spam folder. I think this was an issue that was actually experienced by a number of the wireless providers. So we would welcome the opportunity to sit down with the county staff.
So you're telling me a communications company could not find their spam?
No, I'm telling you that we apparently have a very, very good quarantine and spam system on our computer. But honestly, if I had known about it, I would have been here. And in our defense, we have been working with Mr. Resnick on a number of different jurisdictions, and we welcome working with him in the future.
Okay, and you made the statement that you weren't taking money from the taxpayers and they weren't subsidizing your effort on this process. Well, without a permitting fee, our staff, our engineering staff and planning staff has to be engaged in dealing with whatever it is you present. That means they're being taken away from other issues around the county. You heard a number of comments today about roads and sidewalks and safety of roads, speed bumps, speeding, etc. And those assets are not going to be able to be reviewed by engineering because they're going to be spending tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of staff time reviewing permitting. And you said that the 14 days is not an issue. Well, I can tell you that, and I'll let Mr. Resnick speak to the 14 days and your assertion that you have up to 60 days to deal with the permit. So I'm going to let that one hang out there. I have some real challenges with the communication tax because that was what's the word, usurped from the state as well early and several years ago in how that was distributed. So that's a misnomer. You know, we are sitting here trying to be good partners. We have worked and we've hired an expert to come in and discuss issues. I've seen some comments about the required fee that $50,000 for taking care of maintenance issues on an emergency basis that I don't know if it's your company, I didn't pay attention to the name, but again, that's a cost that comes out of the county's taxpayers up front, only to be returned if it gets returned from your companies. And so that's a challenge. So we're coming to the table with reasonable attempts to do what's in the right, in the best interest of our community, and the preemption and your industry should be more appropriate because there are billions and billions and billions of dollars, and I found it interesting that one of the speakers had his cell phone in his pocket talking about electromagnetic fields. So you know, this is not being taken as serious by the industry as it could and should, and so I'm going to wait for the rest of the hearing, the rest of the discussion. But for you to state that there's no cost to the taxpayers and that this process was not going to cost taxpayers money, I soundly refute that.
If I may respond? With respect to the cost to the taxpayers, my point was that the county is receiving revenue from the communication services industry as compensation for the use of the rights-of-way. I believe the figure to the county is very likely $1 million, if not more. Again, I have not looked at the most recent spreadsheets, but that is revenue that is coming to the county that can be used to review these permits. And I will tell you again that in connection with the adoption of the communication services tax rate by the county had the choice to elect to take the higher tax rate in lieu of collecting the statutory allowed permitting fee. I believe they chose to take the higher tax rate. That is certainly something if you wanted to revisit, whether or not you would elect to take the lower tax rate and collect fees on an individual basis for the building, the permits as they come to the county. That's certainly, I believe, your prerogative. But I just wanted to reply to that. And again, I'm sure Gary will clarify this, but the statute, the 14 days is the time frame within which to determine if an application is complete. County can certainly calendar and just very quickly send out an email if they deem something's incomplete within the 14 days. After it's deemed complete, you have the 60 days total or 90 if the 30-day negotiation period is invoked. So I can tell you from my client, Verizon Wireless, we certainly want to work with the county to assure that your needs as well as ours are met. Again, I can't speak to the environmental aspect. I will certainly let Gary, because I know that's something that's regulated by the FCC. I'm happy to answer any other questions that you may have as the hearing progresses. And again, we do appreciate your time.
Madam Chair, Ms. Lawyer, there was a presentation, you're still here. There was a presentation made that there is a requirement on the ADA side of matters. I'm unfamiliar with how many may have this ADA issue, but as a good partner, would you or the industry, or would you take it back to the industry to consider that if individuals have a significant ADA issue or electromagnetic sensitivity, that would be an issue for them inside their home that they purchase or they rent, to be considered, because we do this with mosquito control, where people have respiratory issues where mosquito control does not spray in their area, and they're cataloged and it's known. So would that be something that the industry would consider, that that would not be placed outside of somebody's home who has known or has documentation as an ADA issue within their medical challenges?
With respect to the ADA issue, the specific language in the state statute regarding the ability to deny a permit based on ADA reads as follows, and I'll read it expressly from the statute, which I have in my hand, which is that it materially interferes, and this is the permit, with compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act of similar federal or state standards regarding pedestrian access or movement. So my understanding is that, for example, ground equipment can't be placed such in a sidewalk such that it precludes a wheelchair or other it has the appropriate ADA accessibility. I think to your point, Commissioner, is that I believe the ordinance does provide that there's to be a placard placed on the door of any residence or buildings within 100 feet of a proposed facility. I believe that's a requirement prior to the building permit even being applied for. And with that in mind, again, the county has the ability to invoke with a 30-day negotiation with respect to the relocation of a facility, and that certainly, I think, would be something that's appropriate, that if there's someone who has particular sensitivity, that the particular install be relocated based, within that process. That I believe is already in the proposed ordinance.
Well, what I hear is you referring to as a statute that reflects one thing. I'm asking you to secure an amendment to it that provides for, we have 310,000 people in this community. If we have 5,000 people that are affected, I would suggest that would be very minimal for consideration. So, if it isn't done now, maybe in a future legislative period, the industry can go through and provide for, or voluntarily do it. And so that's just being brought up now, and then we're in a public hearing. We got another shot at this again, which I'm surprised that you wanted to continue it, since you're going to have this conversation again, and more time for those who have a challenge with this to come up and give you more points of view. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public you'd like to address? Seeing no one, we'll close the public.